This is why you should never lie to an empath. And before we go anywhere near the mechanics of how an empath detects deception, before we get into the psychology of what happens in the empath's nervous system, when someone is not telling the truth in their presence, I want to spend a moment with something that most conversations about this topic skip entirely, because it is less interesting than the detection and considerably more important than anything else we are going to discuss. The reason you should never lie to an empath is not primarily that she will catch you. The reason is what the catching does, not to her, not to the dynamic, not to the practical outcomes of the situation in which the lie was told, but to something in the relationship that existed before the lie and cannot exist in the same form after it. Because an empath who has caught a lie, who has felt the gap between what was said and what is true in the specific way that empaths feel things, in the body, before the mind has finished processing, with a clarity that is more like recognition than deduction. That empath does not simply know you lied. She knows something about why you lied, and the why, perceived with the same accuracy as the what, tells her something about the relationship, about the person she is dealing with, about the safety of the space between you that the lie was told in, that no amount of subsequent explanation or apology or revised truth can fully undo. This is what makes lying to an empath different from lying to most people. Not that the detection is more likely, though it is, but that the knowledge that follows the detection is more complete, more specific, more permanently incorporated into how she understands you, not just in the moment of the lie, but in every interaction that comes after it. By the end of this episode, you are going to understand exactly what an empath actually detects when someone lies, why she detects it with such consistency and such accuracy, and why the people who have learned this lesson the hard way will tell you, with a specificity born from experience, that the lie was never worth what it cost them. Let's start with what is actually happening in an empath's nervous system when someone in her presence is not telling the truth, because this is where most conversations about empaths and deception go wrong. They describe the detection as something mystical, as an ability that operates outside of explicable mechanism, as a gift that cannot be understood and therefore cannot be prepared for or defended against. It is not mystical. It is extraordinarily well-developed pattern recognition, operating through a perceptive system that was refined, in most cases, over years of necessity. The empath's ability to detect deception is built on the same foundation as every other aspect of her perceptive capacity. It is the ability to read the gap between what someone is presenting and what is actually there, developed to the specific level of refinement that it has reached through the repeated, often high-stakes practice of having to read that gap accurately in situations where getting it wrong was costly. And the gap between a lie and the truth is not subtle. From inside the nervous system of someone whose primary mode of processing human interaction is the comparison of presented surface to actual reality, a lie is one of the most distinctly readable things another person can produce. Not because liars are careless. In many cases, liars are extremely careful, but because the care itself is information. The additional cognitive load of maintaining a false version of reality alongside the true one produces changes in behavior, in timing, in detail, in the quality of eye contact, in the specific texture of someone's energy when they are speaking, that are below the level of most people's conscious detection, but are well within the range of what an empath's nervous system is continuously processing. She is not listening only to the words. She is listening to everything that the words are embedded in. And when the everything does not match the words, she knows. Before she can explain how she knows, before the knowing has traveled from wherever it originates in her nervous system to the conscious, verbal, articulable part of her mind that could produce a sentence like "I think you are lying." She knows in the way that you know when you step on something in the dark, not through analysis, through the body's immediate registration of contact with something that is not what it should be. Now let's talk about the specific things the empath is detecting, because precision matters here more than atmosphere. The first thing she detects is not the lie itself, but the moment of decision. The fraction of a second in which the person in front of her decides to say the false thing instead of the true one. This decision moment has a specific quality in the energy of the person making it. A microsecond of something that reads as a pivot, as a departure from the natural forward motion of honest speech, as the equivalent of a conversational step sideways that the empath's nervous system registers as a directional change before the step has been complete. Most people's perceptive systems do not catch this moment because they are processing language and meaning and context at the speed that normal social interaction requires, which leaves almost no capacity for the kind of below-the surface monitoring that would make the moment detectable. The empath is processing all of those things simultaneously, and has additional processing bandwidth available specifically for the below the surface dimension, because that dimension has always been where the most important information lies. She catches the pivot, not always consciously. But her nervous system notes it and files it alongside everything else it is collecting about the interaction, and by the time the lie has been fully delivered, she is sitting with an accumulation of information that produces a feeling she has learned, over years of experience with this feeling, to take seriously even when the conscious mind is still entertaining the possibility that she is wrong. The second thing she detects is the quality of detail in the lie versus the quality of detail in the truth. Truthful speech has a specific texture. It is selectively detailed in ways that reflect how memory actually works, which is to say it is rich in the details that were personally significant and sparse in the details that were not, and the distribution of detail follows an emotional logic that is different from person to person, but internally consistent for any given person telling the truth about their own experience. Lying disrupts this texture in specific ways that the empath's pattern recognition catches even when the liar is sophisticated. Over-detailed lies, the ones where the liar has prepared a version of events that includes more detail than the situation would naturally produce, feel different from the truth in their smoothness. They have the quality of something rehearsed rather than remembered, of a version of events that has been constructed for presentation rather than simply retrieved from experience. Under-detailed lies, the ones where the liar has kept the story deliberately vague to avoid the consistency problems that detail creates, feel different in the other direction, with a deliberate thinness that is itself a form of information. The empath does not always know in the moment which category of lie she is encountering, but she feels the departure from the texture of this specific person's truthful speech, because she has been monitoring that texture since the interaction began, and the departure is as readable to her perceptive system as a wrong note in a piece of music she has been listening to carefully. The third thing she detects is the most important one, and the one that is most permanently consequential for the relationship in which the lie is told. She detects the feeling behind the lie, not the lie's content, not the specific false information being delivered, but the emotional reality of the person telling it. The fear, if the lie is motivated by fear of her response to the truth. The contempt, if the lie is motivated by a belief that she is not owed the truth. The calculation, if the lie is motivated by a desire to manage the outcome of the interaction in ways that the truth would not allow. The shame, if the lie is motivated by something about the truth that the person telling it cannot bear to have seen. All of these emotional realities are present in the person telling the lie simultaneously with the lie itself, and an empath does not receive only the lie. She receives everything that is present in the person delivering it. This is why lying to an empath is not simply a risk of being caught in an inaccuracy. It is an involuntary revelation of the emotional reality that motivated the inaccuracy. And that revelation, perceived with the same completeness and the same accuracy that the empath brings to everything she perceives, tells her more about the person she is dealing with than the truth would have told her. The truth would have told her what happened or what is happening, or what the person thinks or feels. The lie tells her all of that, and also tells her what the person believes about her, about what she can handle, about what she is owed, about the nature of the space between them, and whether that space is safe enough for honesty. The lie is not just false information. It is a complete and involuntary communication about the relationship, and the empath receives the complete communication, not just the false information. Which is why the lie costs so much more than the truth would have cost, and why the person who tells it almost never fully understands, until the consequences have become undeniable, exactly how much they revealed in the moment they thought they were concealing. Now here is where it gets specific in a way that most people who have lied to an empath and watched the aftermath unfold did not fully anticipate. Because the empath who detects a lie does not always confront it immediately. Often she does not confront it at all, not directly, not in the moment, not with the "I know you are lying" that the detection seems like it should produce. She sits with it. She processes it with the same thorough, multidimensional attention she brings to everything she perceives, turning it over, examining it from multiple angles, comparing it to everything she already knows about this person, and this dynamic in the history of how truth has moved between them. She does this quietly, without announcing that she is doing it, and the person who told the lie frequently interprets her continued composure as evidence that the lie worked, that the detection did not happen or was not complete or was not as accurate as it actually was. This interpretation is one of the most consequential errors available in the dynamic of lying to an empath, because what is actually happening in the quiet is not the absence of knowledge. It is the accumulation of something that the confrontation, if it had come immediately, would have prevented. A complete and settled understanding of exactly what the lie revealed about the person who told it, arrived at without the distortion that confrontation would have introduced, and incorporated into how the empath understands this relationship going forward in a way that is permanent, and that will influence every subsequent interaction whether or not the lie is ever explicitly named. The silence after a detected lie is not forgiveness. It is not acceptance. It is not the empath deciding that the lie does not matter. It is the empath doing what she always does with information that is too important to react to before it has been fully understood. And what she does with it once it has been fully understood, and why the person who told the lie will eventually know with certainty that it was detected even if it is never directly confronted, and what the long-term cost of lying to someone whose perceptive system is built the way the empath's is built actually looks like in the daily texture of the relationship. That is exactly where we are going next. What she does with it once it has been fully understood is not what most people expect, and the not expecting is itself part of why lying to an empath costs more than the liar typically calculates before deciding the lie is worth the risk. The expectation, shaped by how most people process being lied to, is that the empath will eventually either confront the lie directly or absorb it without significant consequence. That the outcome will be either a scene or a silence that functions as forgiveness, and that either of these outcomes represents a manageable cost for the information that the lie protected. Neither of these outcomes is what actually happens. What actually happens is more gradual and more thorough and more permanent than either confrontation or forgiveness, and it operates at a level of the relationship that is below the surface of what the liar is monitoring for signs of consequence. What happens is that the empath recalibrates. Not dramatically, not in a way that announces itself as recalibration, in the quiet, internal, thoroughgoing way that the empath processes everything that matters. She updates her understanding of the person in front of her with the information the lie provided, and that updated understanding becomes the new baseline from which every subsequent interaction is navigated. Not the old understanding plus a note that a lie was told. A genuinely new understanding, informed by everything the lie revealed about what this person believes about her, about the relationship, about what she is owed, about the nature of the honesty available in the space between them. And the new baseline is not the same as the old one. It cannot be. Because the lie was information, and once information has been received and processed by a perceptive system as thorough as the empath's, it cannot be unfounded. It is permanent. It changes the map, and the person navigating the relationship using the old map, the one that existed before the lie, the one that showed a relationship in which a certain quality of honesty and good faith was present, is now navigating with a map that the empath is no longer using. They are moving through the same space with different information about its actual topography. And the divergence between their maps is the thing that eventually becomes undeniable, even to the person who thought the lie had worked. Here is what the recalibration actually looks like in practice, because this is where the consequence of lying to an empath becomes most visible to the person who told the lie, usually without them initially understanding what they are seeing. The empath becomes slightly more careful. Not obviously, not in a way that announces itself as a change in behavior, but in the specific, subtle way that someone becomes careful when they have updated their understanding of how safe a particular space actually is. She offers slightly less of herself spontaneously. Not nothing, not the dramatic withholding that would signal a confrontation, just slightly less of the unguarded depth that was always the most distinctive quality of her presence in the relationship. She listens slightly differently, still with the full quality of attention that has always made her company feel like being genuinely heard, but with an additional layer of monitoring that was not there before, a part of her perceptive system that is now running a background check on the incoming information that it did not need to run when the baseline assumption of good faith was intact. She asks slightly different questions. Not the questions that would expose the lie directly, but questions whose answers she already has some version of, questions that function as calibration checks, as ongoing assessments of the consistency between what is being said now and what the lie revealed about what is actually true. All of this is nearly invisible from the outside. The liar, watching for signs of confrontation and not seeing them, typically concludes that the lie worked. They are watching for the wrong thing. The consequence of lying to an empath is not a confrontation. It is a permanent adjustment in the quality of access that the relationship provides. And that adjustment, invisible in any single interaction, accumulates over time into something that the liar eventually feels as a distance they cannot explain and cannot close, because they do not know when it opened or what opened it, because the opening was not announced and the cause was not named. It just became, gradually and without ceremony, how things are between them now. This is the specific dynamic that people who have lost something significant through lying to an empath describe, sometimes years after the fact, when they are trying to understand what happened to a relationship that they thought was intact. They describe a slow thinning of something that used to be full, a quality of presence that used to be complete and became partial in a way they noticed without being able to source. A sense that the person who used to meet them all the way in conversation now meets them partway and stops there, not visibly, not rudely, but definitively. That the warmth is still present, but is operating from slightly further back than it used to. That the depth that was always the most distinctive feature of the connection is still technically available, but requires a kind of access that is no longer being granted automatically. That now requires something the person cannot quite identify, because what it requires is the trust that the lie removed and that no amount of subsequent good behavior can restore by good behavior alone. Because trust in the economy of an empath's relationships is not a position that can be recovered by the demonstration of continued honesty. It is a quality of the space between two people that is built over time, and that, once a lie has moved through it, carries the knowledge of that passage permanently. Not as a grudge, not as a withholding designed to punish, as an honest accounting of what the space actually is now versus what it was before. And the empath, who is constitutionally incapable of relating to a space as something it is not, cannot restore the old access without the old trust. Not because she is unwilling, because the perceptive system that would have to grant the access is the same perceptive system that detected the lie and has been carrying the knowledge of it ever since. She cannot unknow what she knows. She can forgive. But forgiveness and the restoration of full access are not the same thing, and the confusion between them is one of the most common and most costly misunderstandings available in the aftermath of lying to an empath. Now let's talk about the specific kinds of lies that cost the most, because not all deceptions carry equal weight in the empath's perceptive system, and understanding the difference matters both for the person who told the lie and for the empath who is trying to understand some detected deceptions have moved her more than others. The lies that cost the most are not necessarily the biggest ones in terms of content. A large lie about something relatively peripheral to the core of the relationship produces less permanent damage than a small lie about something that sits at the center of what the relationship is built on. The empath's perceptive system is not measuring the size of the false information. It is measuring what the lie reveals about how the person who told it understands the relationship. A lie told out of what is genuinely fear. Fear of a response that felt genuinely threatening. Fear of losing something that felt genuinely precious. Reads differently in the empath's perceptive system than a lie told out of convenience. Out of the calculation that the truth was not worth the effort of delivering, out of the implicit belief that what the empath does not know cannot affect her. The fear-driven lie is still a lie, still costs something, still produces the recalibration. But it carries with it the emotional reality of someone who cares enough about the relationship to be frightened of losing it. And that care is something the empath's perceptive system registers alongside the deception and holds in the same assessment. The convenience lie, the calculation lie. The lie that was told because the liar believed the empath was manageable enough that the truth was optional. That lie carries an emotional reality that the empath receives with full clarity, and that tells her something about how she is valued in this relationship that the largest fear-driven lie would not tell her. It is not the size of the lie that the empath cannot recover from. It is the contempt, when contempt is what the lie was made of. So what does all of this mean for the person who is in a relationship with an empath and has either already told a lie or is considering telling one? It means that the calculation that most people run before deciding whether a lie is worth the risk is missing the most important variable. The calculation usually runs something like this. If they find out, the consequence is a confrontation, and I will have to deal with the fallout of the confrontation, versus if they do not find out, I avoid the difficulty of the truth, and the relationship continues as it was. This calculation assumes that the two possible outcomes are detection or non-detection, and that non-detection means the lie succeeded. But with an empath, non-detection in the conscious, confrontational sense does not mean the lie succeeded. It means the lie worked at the surface level while failing at every deeper level simultaneously. The empath felt what she felt. She processed what she processed. She updated what she updated. The relationship is different now even if neither person has said so. The access is narrower even if neither person has named it. The trust is changed even if neither person has acknowledged the change. The lie did not remain undetected. It was detected in the only place that actually matters, in the nervous system and the perceptive processing, and the ongoing relational assessment of the person, who is the only judge of the relationship that the relation its actual quality depends on. And in that place the lie was not a secret. It was just a piece of information that the empath, in her characteristic way, chose to process completely before deciding what to do with it. And what she does with it is always, ultimately, the most honest possible accounting of what it actually means. For the relationship, for the person in it, for the quality of what is still available between them and what is not. This is the real reason you should never lie to an empath. Not because she will expose you, because she will know you, all the way, accurately, permanently. And the you that she knows after the lie is the you that the lie revealed. And that version of you, smaller than you actually are, less trustworthy than you actually want to be, less worthy of the specific quality of connection that the empath was offering before the lie changed what she understood about the space between you. That version is not who you wanted her to see, and it is the version she is now navigating from. And getting back to the version she saw before requires something that the lie specifically took from the relationship. The one thing that no subsequent good behavior, no subsequent honesty, no subsequent demonstration of who you actually want to be can simply replace. It requires time and consistency, and the particular patience of someone who is rebuilding something that was working before it was broken. And even then, even with all of that, the empath who has been lied to does not return to exactly where she was before. She returns to somewhere better or worse than that, depending on what the process of rebuilding reveals about who you actually are when you are no longer trying to manage what she knows. And the honesty of that revelation, the irony of the lie eventually producing more transparency than the truth would have, is the final and most complete cost of deciding that she was someone you could lie to. She was never someone you could lie to. She was always someone who would know. You just did not understand, until now, everything that knowing actually meant.